went to Lafayette College. I went away to law school at Fordham University. But in 1981, when I graduated, I came back here and I've been here since. I started with a private practice, and shortly after I started my private practice, I worked as a solicitor for children and youth, then a solicitor for human services. And then when John Morganelli came in as DA in 1992, I became his first assistant. After 6 years, I ran for judge, and I've been a judge for the last 25 years. As part of my judicial responsibilities, I was elected by the other judges to be the president judge. When I was the president judge, I was in charge of the entire court system. It included the 350 employees we had. I did all the hiring and firing, and discipline, all the human resource. I also was in charge of our $30 million budget. I started things like, I created the drug and alcohol and the mental health courts, central booking at the prison. I revamped our custody completely, and I also revamped our criminal procedures. So I've had an awful lot of experience with regard to governmental service and serving the citizens of Northampton County. After 25 years, I left the bench early because I wanted to run for district attorney, because I saw that there were structural problems, both with the inside the office and with the performance of the office, and that's why I stepped down the run. Issues that I want to address, number one, are that within the office, the first assistant district attorney is supposed to be a full-time employee. He makes $140,000 a year, but he's also allowed to have a private practice, and he runs a private practice that's open all week. And during the week, you can find him up in Monroe County, Lehigh County, or Northampton County at various times practicing law, because that's part of his civil practice. No other first assistant district attorney who's a full-time district attorney in the state of Pennsylvania does that. And if you remember, there are, Jim Martin just hired Gavin Holohan to become his first assistant. He had to give up his private practice because he wasn't allowed to work outside the office. And then you might remember Bucks County. The DA there, the first assistant DA, was delivering DoorDash during his lunch hour, and as a result, he was suspended, and he left the office. And because the first assistant was not allowed to make extra money beyond his full-time legal salary. The trial record is not what it should be. In 2001, the DA's office tried 18 cases. 9 of them were flat out not guilty verdicts. 11 were not guilty verdicts in 2022. Part of the problem might be that the staff isn't stable. They've lost 13 assistant district attorneys in the last 3 years. That's about 60% of the assistant district attorney staff that has left. I'm also not happy about the lack of diversity on the legal staff. In that staff, there's no people of color. Recently, I understand that they've hired an Hispanic young man, which is a start, which is good, but they've yet to hire and yet to recruit an African-American presence in that staff. If I'm DA, we're gonna have that, not only on the line staff, but in the upper echelon, because we need representation. If you're gonna have buyback from the community with regard to what goes on in the DA's office and criminal justice, you have to have a presence on the staff. Now, what I would do first is I'm gonna impose an ethical code, a strict ethical code in the office, including addressing the fact that there has been discrimination claims of bullying and inappropriate language in that office. I'm not gonna permit that. I'm not gonna permit anyone to work a second job when they should be working full-time in the DA's office. I'm also going to decriminalize small amount of marijuana. By that I mean I'm gonna have a special program in ARD where the young people who get charged with small amount of marijuana won't have a criminal conviction. If you have a criminal conviction, you can't apply for education loans, and you have difficulty landing some jobs. So we're destabilizing our young our youngsters by prosecuting small amounts of marijuana. And in the year of 2022, there were 350 dispositions for small amount of marijuana. 220 were guilty pleas, and another 120 were ARD dispositions. I'm also in favor of the moratorium by Governor Shapiro with regard to the death penalty, because the death penalty, the way we have it in Pennsylvania, number one, doesn't work. Since the death penalty's been reinstated since 1976, no one has been put to death except the 3 men in the 1990s, the late 1990s, who had mental health problems and volunteered, asked to be put to death. So right now in our death row, we have about 101 inmates. Nearly 50% of them are African American males. So the population is skewed against African Americans. In addition, the death penalty has a high error rate. 11 people since we reestablished the death penalty have been exonerated after they've been sentenced to death, meaning they were set free because they were not guilty. 5 of them since 2019, just within the last 4 years. 5 have been exonerated. People who were condemned to death and were told they were going to get the death penalty, they were later found to be innocent. That high error rate is unacceptable. And finally, it's not a deterrent. If you look across the country, the states with the highest per capita murder rates also have the death penalty. So for all intents and purposes, the death penalty doesn't work in Pennsylvania, and I will not pursue that.